In this video, I'm going to show you how to draft this pattern from scratch for making a pad like this. And this pad has a topper fabric, a backer fabric, a core fabric in the middle, inside between the two layers of fabric. And it has no curves. It's completely straight lines only. It has these two wings that snap at the back. And it's stitched, turned, and top stitched. So the reason I suggest starting with a pattern like this that has no curves is because it's much easier to draft and to adjust. And it's easier to cut the fabric, easier to sew, and easier to turn the fabric as well. And you might find that having pads or making pads with just straight lines works perfectly for you and you don't want to change anything up. Even if you do want to make pads with curves, I do suggest you start drafting patterns with straight lines only so that you understand the fundamentals and the basics of how a pad is constructed, and start from something simple and then adapt it to be something more complicated rather than starting with the complicated stuff. For drafting this pattern, you're going to need a piece of paper and a pencil and a ruler, and also something that'll help you draw perpendicular lines. So anything that has a right angle, like this ruler or a triangular ruler, or even a box or the edge of a piece of paper. So start off by drawing a line that's about 10 centimeters away from the edge. Now you should work with a pencil, but I am going to work with a marker just so that you see better. And now draw a line that is perpendicular to this line. So you don't want to eyeball it because it might come out crooked. So use anything that has a right angle to it and align it along the line, along this line, and then use that to help guide your ruler so that it is perpendicular to this line. This center point is the center of our pad. And now what we're going to do is draft this rectangle here. So the rectangle is 18 centimeters long and 6 centimeters wide. So divided by 2, that's 9 centimeters up and down. So we're going to mark 9 centimeters from the center point up here and 9 centimeters down from the center point. And for the 6 centimeter width, we're going to mark 3 centimeters left and 3 centimeters right. And in order to make the rectangle, we're going to add a few more dots that are 3 centimeters away from the center line. And connect the marks so that we have a line that's parallel to this line. And the same thing on the other side. And now you want to draw a line like this that's perpendicular to these lines. So use your straight edge to make sure you're drawing a perpendicular line. So now we've drafted this rectangle and we need to draft the wings. So the wings connect like this and the snap is at the center. So the snap is going to be here, 3 centimeters away from the edge. So when the wing is opened, the snap is 3 centimeters this way. And we're going to need a bit more fabric for this fabric overlap between the wings. So I add another centimeter here. So instead of 3 centimeters, we're gonna make this 4 centimeters away. So measure 4 centimeters away, and here as well. And now we're gonna need to make this mark, which is where the wing attaches to the body of the pad. So we can make it narrower or higher. I chose to make it 5 centimeters up and down. So I'm measuring 5 centimeters this way and 5 this way. And connect the dots to make the wing. And the same thing over here. Measure 5 centimeters up, 5 centimeters down. and connect the marks. So this is the finished dimensions of the pad, or the stitching line of the pad. And now you're going to need to add a seam allowance around the pad because this pad is sewn together. It's the topper and backer fabric sewn together and then turned and top stitched. So you're going to need that excess fabric for the seam allowance. So you're going to add 7mm seam allowance all around the pad. So I'm just going to measure away from each line 7mm in several places and connect the marks. All right, so this inner line is the stitching line and the outer line is the cutting line. It's where you're going to cut the fabric, and the space between them is the seam allowance. So I'm just going to write SA for seam allowance over here, and I'm going to write stitching line over here. And I'm also going to mark 3 centimeters away from here to indicate where the snap is going to be, and the same thing over here. So our pattern is almost done. We just need to draft the core fabric. So there is a piece of fabric that is rectangular, but a bit smaller than the pad itself, and it's stitched to the topper fabric. So in order to make this rectangle for the core, we just need to measure inwards from the stitching line 7mm. So same thing as before, measure 7mm in. And I'm just going to write core here to indicate that this is the core. And I'm going to write liner number 1 to indicate that this is my first liner pattern, so that I can differentiate this pattern and any other patterns or liner patterns that I make. And now all you have to do is cut along the outer line and you will get the pattern for your topper and backer fabric. It's going to be bigger than the finished pad because you need a seam allowance all the way around. And in addition to the pattern for your topper and backer fabric, you're going to need a separate pattern piece for the core. So you're going to take a piece of tracing paper and tape it using sticky tape so it doesn't move around on you. And using your ruler, trace the core pattern piece. And you can write panty liner or liner number 1 core so that you know that it goes together with this one. And cut this out. Once you've cut this out, you have the topper and backer pattern piece, and this will be your core pattern piece. And you're done. It might seem funny to you that we went to all this trouble just to draw a couple of rectangles and triangles, but this is a good basis and a good way to work from which you can adjust your pad, make it longer or curvier or flared or with different shaped wings. I just wanted to show you how I drafted this pattern. I think it's a good starting point from which to make pads. Now I will make a video on how to use this to sew up the pad itself. So check out the description. Once that video is up, I'll add a link to that in the description. If you have any questions, post them in the comments, or if you like the video, give it a like or leave a comment. I'd be happy to hear that you found this useful.